Hi everybody, and welcome to another RCT2 reviews video. Today we are going to be reviewing some entries from the latest Deurklink Monthly Contest. We're going to look at the 5 highest entries as far as my ratings go. So this contest was run on Deurklink server, and the objective this time was to take an original RCT scenario, so anything from RCT2 or 1, and build on it in kind of a different way. So they had to take a roller coaster that was already in the scenario and refresh it in some way or another, whether that was build it entirely new, whether that was fix it up, whether it was change the ride type, just something in relation to that. There could be no building outside of the scenario boundaries, but the various scenario rules didn't have to be followed as far as like meeting the objective and things like that. So that led to some pretty interesting entries and some pretty incredibly detailed stuff. So we're going to take a look and jump into some of these. So like I said, these are my 5 highest rankings. If you want to see how they actually did in the contest, I will put a link below to the video from Deurklink that runs through all of the entries, so you can see everybody's, and also how they ranked in the official standings. But as far as mine go, these entries are ranked out of 20, which is averaged, or it's an average out of 10, 2 different votes out of 10. So you vote the coaster out of 10, and you vote the rest of the park completion of the kind of objectives and just how the rest of the park looks out of 10. Those two are averaged together to give you a score out of 10, and that's what makes up the overall score. So, without further ado, let's jump in to my first one. So this is Emil and Elvenwood. This is from the original scenario, Haunted Harbor, and they have come in and replaced the wooden coaster with a new one, and did a very nice job with it. So this one scored an 8.5 out of 10 on my list. First of all, just the coaster. This was my favorite coaster in the entire contest. It was done very, very well. This is kind of a textbook-looking GCI roller coaster. Got this nice drop off the lift hill. Nice diving corner, cross underneath the lift hill, these 2 airtime hills in a row. Nice little fan curve here, another diving corner here, and then sort of wrapping the structure as it comes around and into the brakes. Just a beautiful, beautiful coaster, and done incredibly, incredibly well. 2 notes that I would probably make from a realism standpoint. Car-wise, I would probably bump it down to 8, because generally you're going to see a GCI at either 6, 8, or 12. Not to say that 9 isn't possible, but say stick with one of those, and then probably bump this down to a single train, mostly because the brake run's not really long enough for 2. Aside from those like very little nitpicks, I mean, this is an incredible coaster. Very well done, lots of good kind of layout, and you also see some footers here with various scenery pieces. As with all of the Deurklink server contests, this is no custom scenery, but it does include the expansion pack scenery. And hacking and custom palettes, which this one uses. I've certainly made it known that I'm not a huge fan of some of the custom palettes. I don't necessarily like the dark blue water, but, you know, to each their own on that. But outside of this coaster, there's a lot of other cool stuff here. This log flume is great with the diagonal lift hill here. You have your pipe coming up on top, and then this nice little curved section and your curved kind of pergola over top of it. A couple nice little drops here, and then this final steep drop with the wild mouse track layered in there. Maybe not my favorite. I kind of like just the water slide track, but not too bad. And then some really nice scenery throughout. Some pretty great buildings, a nice little facade work. Definitely layered pretty heavily, but still relatively strong. And then you got to look at some of this cool track texture stuff down here. First of all, this crashed ship with the lightning bolt through it. And then this anchor with your chain wrapped around it, and then this giant beer mug here, Sailor's Pints as the store, and then just all the little tiny details throughout, I think, are really well done, and keeping in with some of the original stuff. There's a Ferris wheel here, you have your spiral slide and things like that. And then there's also the ghost train. I was less of a fan of the ghost train just because the building itself is kind of massive compared to everything else on the map, so none of the other structures are really more than, say, 3 stories tall, and then this guy comes in here and is just massive. And the textures are a little bit off for me. This rock work doesn't really work for me compared to the rest of the stuff. So I was less of a fan of that, and then the hotel sort of tacked on to the side here. Using what you've got, though, considering you can own the construction rights for some of this land, and here is the regular, or the entry path that goes in, so you got to work around that since you can't build outside the scenario boundaries as they were set in the original scenario. So definitely a challenge added there, but still nicely done, and you know, this coaster is just beautiful. This one did get a perfect 10 for me on the coaster. So very well done overall on that, and a worthy 5th place. So let us jump into the next one. So the next one here is from Canary Mines. So this was the original scenario from RCT1, I think. Might have been Corkscrew Follies. But Zygorator was the coaster. Zygorator yellow and green, so there was 1 and 2. Before I get into this one, I'll certainly note a little bit of controversy in that the builder Jappy had accused these guys of copying some of his work from a similar scenario that he's doing, kind of rebuilding Canary Mines with custom scenery, and some screenshots that he had posted about a month ago. There is more than a passing resemblance, this park to his park, so it certainly looks like there's a little bit of over-inspiration perhaps, but that said, both of the builders for this do claim that they have not stolen anything from there, and certainly, you know, it's hard to say one way or the other for sure, so I will let the viewer make their own decisions for that if they want to go do their research, but for the purposes of this video, this is a really cool park, and we're going to take a look at it, because I voted it a 9 overall on my scoring. So the theme of this park was built in a kind of abandoned mine, I think was the storyline, and then just kind of redeveloped, and there's a lot to see here. So we'll start with the coaster just because the coaster is the obvious thing. There's 2 of them here, 2 dive coasters coming up on either side. This is a really neat bit here with the Ferris wheels, and then the elevators up underneath, so super cool there. Both holding drops here, diving underground, up through these inversions with this really great support work. Dive back and forth, a little bit different on each of the layouts, which I do like. Then we get into some weirdness here. So here's a Batwing on the one, and then a dive loop into this like helix on the other. Not a huge fan of that, just because it doesn't necessarily feel appropriate for a dive coaster. It feels a little more aggressive than you might see. I'd rather almost have seen this do some kind of interacting helix or something in. But I mean, regardless, it's a nice looking ride. I think if you kind of cut it from here over, it looks just fantastic. On the overall thing, and then your nicely positioned water ride here with the building around it is very nice. The station itself is massive. It's maybe a bit too massive, but it does have a lot of details in there. You do run into a little bit of a challenge here where you almost get lost in the details just because there's a bit of almost what you'd consider clutter. But, you know, you pick out different things here and there. I kind of like the little doors at the bottom here where the ride pops out. And then you have all this different equipment, like here's this little fork truck, here's this crane up top that's hoisting some pipes, here's mechanics fixing this broken water pipe here, and then just all sorts of things like this excavator on the front. And I do like this little covered, almost covered midway. It feels very, you know, Asian theme parky, because they like to do a lot of their covered midways. This sign is pretty cool, although I don't know who's going to see it because it's kind of hidden all the way up here, so a little bit maybe odd in that regard. The go-karts are neat. They're a little bit fantasy in that you have this crane that's holding up this corner, so you jump and go through the corner and then jump back down. And then this crane also that has this sign, which is pretty darn cool, except it's facing where the drivers are never going to see it. I'd probably almost turn it. So it's kind of a neat little detail there. Definitely fantasy-esque, but I mean, let's be honest. The entire park is fantasy because it's a theme park in a mine. And I mean, not Fiesta, Texas, notwithstanding, but it's, you know what I mean. But some other nice little rides here. So you have this guy here with the 2 different cars, which is a pretty clever hack right there to get 2 different cars, 2 different trains, and they're synced together so this operates at the same time, which I thought was a pretty clever hack. And there's lots of other little details. You have the sort of standard stuff that everybody's building, like this little drop tower that's you know, I'm not a huge fan of these days because just everybody's doing the same thing. But nice little 1x1 rides here, and then this train ride, which is sort of scattered all around here, almost buried within all the kind of muck that's in this place. But this turnaround is very nice with the little mine building in the center, the sort of diagonal tunnel as you enter in. So I think that's a really nicely set up space for the whole thing. So quite nice. And just really a good setting for those coasters. Those are definitely some of the more, in my opinion, these are some of the most iconic scenario coasters that are out there. So you can't not enjoy watching those go around. But you know, very nicely done on the whole. Lots of great little details, lots of stuff to discover. Definitely worth checking out. I have to wonder if the hats are meant to be hard hats, the yellow hats, which wouldn't surprise me if so. I think that's a pretty cool idea. But anyway, well done on this one. This one had a 9 on my scoring. And also with a 9 is Recico. So this one was also actually, we talked about Jappy in the last park. This one was also inspired by a released park by Jappy. Full credit given here in that the coaster is named Jappy's Big Dipper. And this is inspired by Bumbly Beach, which was the original scenario, and also the Bumbly Beach remake that Jappy did on New Element with custom scenery, which I did do a review of that. I will put it in the link below, so you can check that out also. But let's take a look at this coaster, and we'll start there. We start with the coaster. A rebuild of Big Dipper, which was the original scenario coaster, which, if you played the original scenarios, they had some trouble with it. You had to avoid a crash, or deal with a crash, so that was always unpleasant. But nice little drop here underneath the station to this lift. I love the multicolored awnings over top of the queue space here, how the queue goes over top of the track, and then also these flags up the lift hill here. And then this sign is great up top. It's a little a shame that the park boundaries don't go out here to the seafront, because I would really love to see this seafront done a little bit, spruced up a little bit, I guess, because it could use it, because the park itself is so nice. A couple nice airtime hills here, curve, and then we go out to this far turnaround, kind of reminiscent of Big Dipper at Blackpool. And then we're going to dive underneath and come back up for this return run. Bunch of hills sort of buried here within the space. One final corner over here into the brakes. Have a nice transfer track here, which is always good to see as far as just details go and things like that. So well done on the coaster. But there's even more to see here. There's a lot of cool stuff. There's some back of house buildings over here, which I really liked. Just some of these maintenance spaces, and just thinking about the park building as a whole, which I do appreciate. Here's another inspiration from Jappy here, and from Blackpool. I already mentioned the Steeplechase Coaster that goes through the coaster, or through the wooden coaster, up and over top of the go-karts area. Just really nicely done in there, and then all these just little details and buildings. Loving this games building and stalls. So here's the, or not games building necessarily, this is the go-kart area, which has a super cool flooring with the checkerboard, and also the info center on here. Nice little arches throughout. It feels like a very seaside-esque, park-esque type building. And as you continue along, we have this wild mouse, wooden wild mouse, which is pretty beautiful. It has this nice little screening wall, like the Blackpool mouse used to have. So done very nicely there. And then a nice little custom ride here. Pretty, actually, kind of big, I think, in the end, but it fits really well, and it's within scale, I think, of the rest of the stuff. It's a pretty cool structure on that side. This little bounce area here also for the using the bouncing peeps here, which I think is pretty cool. And then you can also hop on the sky ride here, and you can head on out to the pier. So this is sort of an added little bonus bit that Jappy added, or that added from Jappy's park. That this is an original thing that Recico did. Really nicely done. Honestly, this is kind of what elevated this park for me to third place. So you have this great little observation tower, or observation type looking building here, as you come out across the space, and then you get onto the pier itself. This building, while it may not look like much, to me is the sort of epitome of pier park boardwalk-esque architecture, where you're really using the building itself to kind of frame where the guests are going. So this great little 2x2 ride right in the middle of the pathway, splits on either side. But then you have all these clever games, like this little duck shoot game, and all the different little details, because each one's got its own little detail. It's not just thrown in. It actually has a little story behind it and makes sense. I mean, this to me is just ideal, and you know, even further elevated by the sign on the back. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff. Have our landing point over here for the Sky Ride, which credit for a tight park. The Sky Ride does not have any corners in it, which it shouldn't. But nicely done there. A little ice cream shop on the side here. A hacked Super Loop fly ride, so this is Vortex there, so very nicely done there. Same thing over here. This is Albatross. It's a hacked ride. And then we also have the little Crystal Palace building here on the very end, which is just incredibly cool. A lot of these old British seaside parks with their piers always had some kind of giant palatial type building at the far end of the park with everything, and it's just got a lot of restaurants and things like that inside, which this one does. So very, very cool there. And then you just look at all these different arches for the pier itself. I like the color. The red is cool. Just really adds to kind of the overall feel and doesn't make it too brown, I suppose. And then there's this final boat ride that kind of runs around everything. Like, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the buoys. They seem a little bit too big. But that said, there's not necessarily a great way to do that. So I can kind of understand it. And like I said, it's a shame that the scenario is what it is and you can't build kind of outside of it. This is just so detailed and cool versus some of the stuff outside of it. But very impressive, very nicely done, and I think this one's worth checking out just to see all the little details that are in it. So very, very well done. Also getting a 9 from me. That's number 3 here. The number 2 is Mecha and Swag. This is Six Flags Over Texas. This one gets a 9.5 from me. So the Six Flags Over Texas scenario includes most of the rides, not the DC coasters or, you know, the newer stuff, of course, since they didn't have the license for the DC, and we're getting up on years since RCT2 came out. So the ride that they wanted to have judged is this one here. So this is Titan, a Geovanola hyper coaster. The real one is one of 2 Geovanola hyper coasters out there. The second of the 2 with an extra helix, which is this guy here. So this is a pretty nice kind of attempt at a recreation. Station a little bit too close to the ground if we're going for straight recreation, but it does have the Texas flag on the roof, which is sort of a big iconic deal. Pretty neat lift hill too, with the banked track as the walkway. This is done on a bunch of, or the stairs, I guess. This was done on a bunch of the coasters here. So nicely done. In the back here we have Aquaman Splashdown, which is the splash boats ride that was removed from the real park a year or 2 ago in preparation for the next coaster, which we're going to see out here in the parking lot in just a minute as we follow this coaster up. A couple little debris things in Connex boxes, because this is the boneyard at the real park, and then these great tractor trailers for Aquaman Power Wave over here. This is the mock Power Splash, which is coming in 2021. But anyway, we get off the drop here into this tight little tunnel, turn around on these excellent supports, which must have taken ages to do properly. A little bit of a turn here to get over this airtime hill, which is just RCT limitations that kind of require some of those corners. So not too bad. Of a odd dip up into this, but have our long brake run here, and then this final section here, which is not bad at all. Just a little bit down in here, tight helix down. A lot of people like to black out on this helix, or at least gray out, because it is very, very intense. And then this final dive up and over and in. Very nice. One of the better Geovanolas that I think I've seen in the game. So credit for that, especially with the supports. So very, very good work there, especially no custom scenery supports of this. I think it is very well done. But nice queue line down here, and just all the different kind of bits and pieces. Now, they did recreate the park and kind of the whole rest of the park, as you saw when I was zoomed out, except for some of the areas like the DC area and some of the other spaces. But I kind of like that, actually, and that they didn't try and force it and squeeze things in. So it's kind of like their version of Six Flags Over Texas. And I think it's a good way to do it because it doesn't force you to put in just too much stuff overall, and I think they can kind of pick and choose what they wanted to do in the areas they wanted to include. And I gotta say, it's, you know, reasonably realistic as far as all of the things tossed in here have been. So very nicely done overall. So let's kind of jump around and take a look at some of these. We've got New Texas Giant here, which is done well, and with the great hack of having the mini coaster car on the front of this to mimic the train of the real one. Excellent custom supports too. Very well done. Love all the different the lawn company staff members and all that kind of stuff. Lots of little great details like that. This layout is fantastic. We won't sit and watch the whole coaster go around, but very well done. A nice look at the original RMC. So moving along, there's just a lot of other stuff. Here's one of my favorites in the whole park. This is Shockwave. This is an Anton Schwarzkopf classic, and a very nice recreation of this one. It's an awkward layout to begin with, but I think this is a very nice recreation of the real thing. We have our observation tower up here, which is similarly placed in the real park. This is an intimate observation tower. Right next to the Superman launch tower with this great little Superman logo, sadly only visible on the one side. And kind of continuing along, we get to the mine trains over here. So this is the original Arrow mine train, runaway mine train. This was kind of what started it all way back in the day as far as mine trains go, and sort of what put Six Flags Over Texas on the map. But very cool. 3 lift hills, kind of a meandering, jerky, awkward layout, but still pretty cool with this great big drop at the end that goes underground through the corner and then pops up over top of the river. And in addition to that, they also have Mini Mine Train, which was a smaller one. I really like the use of the side friction cars. That fits pretty well for the real thing. A nice little tunnel here underneath of the train that I think is done quite well for all of that. So definitely a nice detail there. Lots of other little hack stuff like Gunslinger here. A little train shed on the backside. And then the... you can't pass up the water ride here. This is Roaring Rapids. And then cross underneath the train tracks here and out to Judge Roy's Scream, which is the park's only actual wooden coaster anymore since the RMC conversion. Pretty simple layout, pretty straightforward, kind of a little bit rough, a little bit unpleasant, but it's a nice looking ride. And pretty simple. I always did like the look of this kind of sitting out here along the lakeside. It's a great billboard for the park as you drive in. Lots of stuff to see there. But anyway, coming back, we have the Wild Mouse. This is Pandemonium. This is a Gerstlauer spinning Wild Mouse. Very nice attempt at the layout here. Pretty compact, but just looks good. And the station itself is pretty accurate there. Also the little burger icon here with the seating areas next to it. Kids area over here, this is the Bugs Bunny area, so we have Canyon Blaster, and then a couple of the other little trucks here, and then the carousel up front. So kind of abbreviating this area, abbreviating the DC comics area, so no Batman, no Mr. Freeze, no Joker, but I can't really fault it. What we do inside have Runaway Mountain, which is a premiere, and it's a copy of the SDC Windstorm layout, so not quite the accurate layout here inside, but I can't necessarily fault that because it's hard layout to get in, especially with some of the different elements that it has, like a diagonal lift hill, which would be pretty tough to do. So that is forgiven, I think. Inside we have the, or continuing along, we've got the log flume through here. This is one of the original Arrow log flumes. Actually, I think it was the original Arrow log flume. And then over on this side, just stopping here to point out these great little details of the miniature golf holes for the planter. I mean, that's just fantastic. Really great detail. And then finally we get into our other area here. which is Mexico, I believe. So this is El Diablo, a Ring of Fire attraction, which is sort of recent within the park. And then the last coaster that we'll look at is Lava Bora, which is an Intamin bobsled. Still running well. If you did see the bobsled entries that I had reviewed a couple, that was last month's contest. Pretty similar layout, especially to what Swag did last time, but still looks good. I love the color variation, which is smaller than kind of the per piece variation there, so looks good. I like it. Very nicely done. And then just all the little kind of crunchy details, I suppose, with the pathway here, just having some texture on it, and then just all the little details. I mean, for a monthly contest, this is kind of obscene how much they got done and how much detail they put into this whole thing. I mean, just incredibly well done. So, a strong 9.5, and honestly, I thought this was going to be hard to beat, and I think it was, in a lot of people's eyes, definitely hard to beat, but one park did it. One park got the perfect 10, and that's Airtaunt and Mama Rias with this one. So this is Goodnight Park, which is based off of Goodnight Park, the scenario originally. And the original scenario had reverser coasters, dueling reverser coasters, which was super cool just because you don't really see those used anywhere. I mean, pretty much nobody uses those, and, you know, for good reason. They can't do a whole heck of a lot. And it's a ride type that we haven't seen since, like, the 1920s. But they came and put 2 RMCs in their place, which, you know, what better company to have come in and make it look a little fancy than RMC. So we're going to take a look at that and see these guys. Just incredibly cool design. So front car is changed on this also, just like the last one. So let's take a look at this. The pathway of the ride follows similar to the scenario coasters, which I think is pretty impressive, because honestly this flows pretty well as far as an RMC goes, and just a dueling coaster in general. I mean, I love those rolls together, splits apart, and it's kind of doing different things. Like, it's not doing just a mirror image of what the other ride does, which is what I would call kind of an unsuccessful dueling coaster, for example. It's doing different stuff, and yet it still comes together for these dueling racing moments. And then it finishes pretty much spot on together, so you gotta give that a wow. I mean, it's very impressive how incredible these coasters are. I think they're done really well. The supports are done very strongly using the inverted monorail for the different cross beams and everything. Love the support on the big inversion here, kind of this bridge support. That would be really neat to sort of hang there as you rolled over the top of it. Feels like something that RMC would do, to be honest. And then let's look at the park itself. I mean, there's just a ton to see here. And I think kind of before even looking at the park, you got to look at these dragons. It's definitely like a fantasy park, and I mean, this is sort of Mama Rias' signature thing, is these giant sculptures of various stuff. And I mean, this is impressive. It's very, you know, you can definitely get an expression out of that dragon. And same thing over here with this one, and you know, the red one over here, and the green and yellow one. It's a lot to take in, and it's just visually kind of spectacular, visually impressive. It's, you know, not something that I would ever go do as far as building goes, but you know, it works. It's pretty cool, and one of the best uses of this water funnel tornado thing that I think I've ever seen as far as those go. So super cool. Got your crash ship here. A lot of the entertainers here in the water and kind of coming out and hoping to get rescued there as this big purple dragon has crushed all that. There's a pretty sizable boat on the front here, which is impressive. So this is the this nice white ship here with the blue sails, which I really love. It's a good color, different than the brown that you usually see. And honestly, color here was really the big thing that is needed, considering that the whole thing, as far as the castle goes, you're just getting a lot of shades of brown, occasionally a little bit of green with the landscaping, and then these red peaks to the various roofs. So it needed some color, and to be honest, in a couple of spots you do kind of lose yourself just in terms of figuring out where you are as the layering goes of the various levels. But I mean, it's not too hard to figure out over time. You just kind of to work your way through it and look at the scenery and turn it off and kind of work your way around the spacing. I mean, there's a lot of cool details here. All these crossbows on top of each of the top, or the ballista, I suppose. But some really great details. The sort of church type building here, and then obviously the castle on this side. Loving the little church here with the apse and everything, and the sort of buttressing that comes along on the sides. This built-up structure, or the built-up rockwork underneath, almost feels like over time things have collapsed down, and this has gotten built up on top of it. The signage here, using just the dots, you get a really nice texture with, you know, a clever use of scenery for sure. And then inside the little courtyard down here, you have this jousting contest and seating and a couple other cool things like that to see. A couple of weird objects. I don't necessarily think this smoke object looks good, nor do I think this roofing object looks good. It's a little bit too weirdly textured and shaded compared to the other stuff. Same with the rock work here and the pathway. But, you know, it's hard to fault those sorts of things. I mean, like, this sort of stuff over, you know, when you look at this whole coaster and in total. I really do like this, the Judas Cradle here, this topspin ride with has the waterfall behind it. I appreciate that they use the standard in-game one and not the custom scenery or the expansion pack ones, because those are kind of ugly. This is the same stuff that comes with this kind of ugly scenery pieces here, so there's always a balance of more usage versus what's going to be a good look overall, and I think in general the original game stuff is always going to win out as far as that goes. But, you know, you have little details like these footer pieces here that are just, you know, work very well and look good. So just so much to see in this one, and a lot of stuff. But honestly, I could just sit and watch the coaster all day. Just the way that interacts with the landscaping around it, and with the castle and everything, and then just with each ride itself. I mean, it's wild. So this is the, I mean, granted, I've only voted in 2 contests now. This is the only double 10 that I've given, and, you know, I think it is well deserved. This one did actually also win first place in the overall contest from everybody's votes, so hard to argue with that, and definitely a winner in my eyes. So well done to this one, and to all the entries. There were 27 entries, I think, this time, and honestly, the quality on the whole is pretty strong. A lot of really great details, a lot of people learning how to build some pretty neat stuff, and it just makes me looking forward for the next one. So, you know, well done to all, but especially my top 5 that I've done here. Check those out. I'll put a link below to get to the server to see all those park files if you want to check them all out. But anyway, that's all for today. If you would like to see other parks reviewed, feel free to drop me a note as per usual. I will be back with more reviews and tutorials and build stuff and all sorts of other things here very soon. So until then, thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.